Room boys. I'm sure you guys miss me and I'm making every Friday miserable. Y'all, we have a great episode. If you want to hear about a company that is has very interesting business, Cloudtrucks, and also has been gone from a startup to successful company. If you want to hear more, if you want to be inspired by an entrepreneur, this episode is for you. But before we get started, I do want to announce to everybody that I have something special for all my MadGaines viewers, which is you can now, if you go to my software that I built, that is my baby and has been my baby for a long time, now at carriersure.com, you can report carriers for wrongdoing for free, and you can review the carrier before you hire them to make sure they don't have reports against them. So what's wrongdoing, right? It's double brokering, theft, no insurance, customer back solicitation, hostage load, all that stuff that drives you nuts. But it's also very, very serious. Not the little crappy things like, oh, they dropped my lid, baby. No, it's serious things against a carrier we want to notify other brokers and shippers about. Again, it's carriersure.com. Check it out. You get a free week, a free trial. This is my baby. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. So let's get started. I want to introduce our guest, Tobenna. Welcome to the show, Tobenna. I'm very excited to have you. And where are you hailing from? I'm assuming you're hailing from San Francisco?
Correct. I'm in San Francisco at the moment.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. So what did you think when I reached out to you and I was like, hey, want to be on the show? Were you like, oh, no?
Well, I was thinking No. I'm a huge fan of the show. I've watched a number of your episodes. I remember maybe it was like a year and a half ago, I watched an episode with Dan Lewis, and I thought it was a great episode. It was Dan Lewis, and there was also the one that you had with, I'm forgetting his name right now, but it was like Burker against Burker, talking about new features that they had launched, and that was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun in the past too. That was both of those were really great episodes. So wait, before I get started, I just got distracted. Like I usually get distracted in 2 seconds, and I swear I don't have ADHD. I've been tested many times. One of my best friends, her name is Hannah Richards. She works over at Amazon. And she's always telling me how wonderful Amazon is, by the way. But the other thing she talks about all the time is her Peloton. Do I see a Peloton behind you? Like,
yeah.
And
yes.
Okay, is it as great as Hannah says it's as great as it is? Say no.
There are a number of people at the company that would say that it's the best thing in the world, and they do Peloton contests all the time. I am unfortunately not one of those people. I don't use it as much as I would like to, but it's good. It's good. It's good enough.
Oh my goodness. You just made my whole day. I'm going to literally send this to Hannah and be like, Hannah, look, not everybody that has a Peloton is obsessed with it. And she sends me, I do not have a Peloton. It looks like a fuck ton of work, and it looks like a lot. Okay. But she sends me these links from Instagram, this guy named Cody. Apparently he's one of the instructors. And now I'm addicted to the Instagram Peloton videos because they're hilarious. So anybody who hasn't checked those out, you should, even if you don't know what the hell Peloton is, go to Instagram and check it out because it's really funny. And I had to bring that up when I saw it. So yes, sidetrack there. Okay, Tobenna, tell me, how the hell did you get into trucking? Because you have a great resume. Everything's beautiful. I'm not saying anything's wrong with trucking, but there's a lot wrong with trucking. So how did we get such a brilliant person such as yourself in our industry?
Well, first of all, so I was born and raised in Nigeria, and my parents are entrepreneurs, and they run a manufacturing business. And I worked there when I was younger. And anyone who knows manufacturing knows that it's very, very closely tied to trucking. So at the time, we were manufacturing soap, and my job was picking these bars of soap off the production line and putting them in a box and sealing them up and putting them on the truck to go get sold out in the market. So I've always been kind of around these types of industries. And they've always been the industries that excite me. So over the past few years, I have worked on real estate technology and HR technology, but trucking has been near and dear to my heart, and found my way kind of back to it about 5.5, 6 years ago, working on remote operations and autonomous trucking company. And that was really like where I started to understand the problems that truck drivers were facing on a day-to-day basis.
That is really cool. I didn't know that. So you've been in trucking. Basically, trucking's been in your life, your whole life. So you're not like some of us who just fall into it and then never can get out. So are you
It's addicting,
a
right?
techie?
Yeah.
It is addicting. And it's also like an abusive relationship in a way, which I think a lot of us are about to feel the abuse of that relationship. We've been on an upside and I think we're about to head to the downside, start to level out, but who knows? Yeah. Tell me, are you like, so what's your specialty? Are you in the tech world? Are you good at techie? Are you like a software guy? Or are you more architectural? Like, where's your specialty coming at?
Well, I was a product manager for a number of years, which means that I like to think of myself as someone who's good at figuring out what to build and helping to convince people to build it. That's what I did as a job when I worked at a number of tech companies. That's what I've done since I've been a founder of different tech companies. So I can't build anything myself, unfortunately, but I can convince people who are much smarter than I am to build stuff, and it's worked out well for me so far.
I love it. I'm actually a product manager now too, and in the role of at Carrier Sure at my company, and it is a challenge. That is for sure. It's and you've been doing it a lot longer. But for those of you who are like, what the hell are they even talking about? You legitimately come up with this idea of a product, and I like at first with Carrier Sure, I mocked mine up on pieces of paper and clipped things in from other websites and like made it look all ghetto, and then I was like, here. Designer website, like a product designer, can you make this look beautiful? And then I brought it and got it a prototype, but like there's back end developers, front end developers, you have to organize them all, you have to prioritize features. Like it's an intense role. But it's also very cool. And I'm assuming that's a journey you've been on as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing about software is that it looks deceptively simple, right? So when something is built, especially if it's been built really well, it looks very simple. But trying to figure out how to piece these things together and write very clear, very detailed specifications of what problem are you trying to solve? Why are you trying to solve it? What's the actual solution? What are all the different things that could break given your solution? Because there is no perfect solution. What's the best path given that you're going to have customers who have different needs and ideas and you're trying to build something that kind of works for them? It's very challenging for sure. And
it is.
I think that is one of the hardest parts of product management.
It is. And for me, it's like, don't get distracted by the shiny things too. Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, I thought of the best idea that my users would just love. And, I sketch it all out and I do this whole thing and I'm like, oh my God. And I make myself wait like a week before I roll it out to anybody because I know that getting distracted by shiny things is like, I do the same thing, Tobenna, with my Amazon cart, which Hannah will also be mad at me hearing this, but I put things in my Amazon cart and then I make myself wait before I hit the checkout button.
I think it's a good principle.
I think so too. And I'm sure Amazon's like, no, check out, baby. Like, get it, rock and roll. Buy more shit, Cassandra. Lord knows you need more shit. Okay, so let's learn about Cloudtrucks. And what the hell is Cloudtrucks? And also, why do you have a Texas address when you're in San Francisco?
I'll take the second one first. So we have a Texas office as well. It's on Commerce Street in Texas, and we have some folks over there, like some of our operations team, some of the safety team. Dallas is a great trucking hub, so we want to have a presence there. And now we actually have another office. Well, I guess we haven't actually signed a lease, but we have some people in Austin as well. So it's looking like we're expanding more in Texas. But the Cloudtrucks is basically a business management platform for truck drivers. The way this started was years ago. I was spending a lot of time in trucker forums. That's really where it started. And I was spending a lot of time in these trucker forums, and I was noticing a trend. When you read articles like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, a lot of the things that you saw in the trucking industry, a lot of the problems that people were describing was that there was this driver shortage. But then you went into these forums and you didn't really see drivers complaining about driving. You saw them complaining about different business management problems that they had to deal with. How do I work with brokers, negotiate with brokers, select the best load? So those are all revenue problems. Then how do I get paid faster, get better payment terms? Those are all cash flow problems. How do I lower my fuel costs, maintenance costs, the cost of purchasing a truck? Those are all cost problems. And then how do I remain compliant, which is some of the work that you're doing, right? It's like how does a carrier remain compliant? And the more you look at these things, the more obvious it became that a lot of the problems that the drivers are facing in the industry are business management challenges. And it makes sense, right? It's very hard for someone who is out there driving a truck every single day to also manage their entire business every single day. Like nobody can really do that. So we founded Cloudtrucks on this principle that if we made it easier and easier and easier to manage your business, then you could be a lot more successful as a business owner and as a truck driver. And if we do our jobs well, there are a number of things that are going to happen. One, you're going to see more success from existing owner operators in the industry. Two, you're going to see a larger number of company drivers decide to become owner operators because they now have the right set of tools to do so. And three, you're going to see more people, younger people who are looking for the right career for themselves decide to become truck drivers because now it's been the barrier to entry has been lowered and they know exactly what they're getting, what types of tools they need. So that's kind of the mission of Cloudtrucks, is to make it easier and easier to be a trucking entrepreneur.
That I absolutely love that. You speak to my heart. I know that one of my really good friends, Andrew Teal, he's all over social media, and great person to follow on Twitter, by the way. He's a big trucking guy, right? He was growing up in trucking. He's been in logistics. He's been in a big shipper before. But one thing he always talks about is how bad truckers are at managing their business. And, it makes sense, right? They're driving on the road. Often they just have one truck. They aren't business people. And trucking is incredibly complex. Running a trucking company is incredibly complex, and it's great. So give us an example of like, okay, when you were designing the product, what was the first thing you were like, we need to solve this first, this problem first for them?
Yeah. So the first thing that we did was we just looking at the industry, we said, solving just one problem is insufficient. We need to feel the pain ourselves. So we actually registered as a carrier. Mm-hmm. In fact, we registered as a carrier and we bought one truck and we hired one driver to drive that truck as a way to start to feel the pain.
That's a great idea.
So the first thing that we ended up
feel that workflow. Like that's fucking brilliant. I like it.
Yep. So it's like eating your own dog food, right? So the first thing that we built was just a way for our internal drive. Yeah.
Are you going to go back to that, right?
Yes.
Like, have you tried your own dog food? Do you have a dog? You've tried the dog food? Now I'm
I do not have a dog today, but I do not have a dog today, but I will not comment on whether I have or have not done that in the past.
I love it.
I'll leave it at that.
Also a great analogy. Okay, keep going. So then we got this truck, right? We got this truck driver, and he or she's on the road, and you're like, tell me all your problems, or you're feeling all the problems too. What was
because we were, in fact, I was the back office staff. He was the truck driver out there on the road. So we started figuring out, like, what does he need to be successful, right? We had our own MC. First problem we had was when you get your own MC, there aren't a lot of brokers that you can actually work with. You can work with the digital ones like Uber Freight, Convoy, right? But
they're not real trucking companies, though.
The JB Hunts, the TQLs. That's true. So we couldn't work with a large number of brokers until we hit 6 months. So the first
Yep.
thing was, how do we make it easy for you to go on an app and see loads from the brokers that you are approved to work with? And
Oh, interesting.
insurance is a killer, right? Insurance is
Yeah.
a killer at the start. I actually didn't realize that until we set up our own MC, and insurance cost us, I want to say it was $24,000 per year in our first year. I actually don't know how anyone starts a trucking business with that type of cost. So we decided at that point, first thing was build an integration with some of these companies and make it easier for people to find loads in one place, right? Then make it easy for people to go through the exact same workflow. It's very hard to go through different workflows with different brokers. Some brokers require you to upload a proof of delivery via an app.
They do.
Some will
like
say
18
you have
different
to email it
requirements.
to them. Exactly. Like no one can remember that, right? So we said, let's abstract this away. The driver doesn't need to think about this. You have the exact same workflow on the Cloudtrucks app. And then we figure out the workflow with the specific broker, and we can automate that workflow of what the broker needs. If they need us to upload it on their app, or if they need us to upload it on some specialized app or send email. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So that's definitely.
I just think that's so cool.
No. So that's where we started, and then the last piece there. So it's like kind of going through the workflow, right? We said, let's start with how you find loads, then let's go to how you submit proof of delivery and just make it standardized. Then let's pay you in a standardized way. Again, some brokers pay in 2 business days, some pay in 30, some pay in 45. It's very hard for a driver to plan. So we said, let's just make this very simple. The first version of Cloudtrucks, we would pay you within 2 business days, regardless of the broker. And then it's left to us to figure out the cash flow management on our end.
Which I would too.
Yeah. So that's where we started. So that's where we started, and because in the process, because today we are a carrier, there was no plan to be a carrier. Actually, like I didn't have a strong opinion on whether we needed to be a carrier or not. I had a strong opinion that we should own a carrier so that we could see the problems, and then when we saw the problems, it was clear that there's a specific type of truck driver who just wants to lease onto a carrier and have that carrier manage everything for them. And that became our first product. So the virtual carrier products, we manage everything for the driver. And one of the benefits on the cost side, so in addition to all the technology that we've built, is it becomes almost like a quasi-union in a sense where as more and more drivers join the platform, the overall cost goes down. So cost of insurance goes down, cost of fuel goes down, cost of maintenance goes down, and we can then spread those cost savings across the entire driver pool. So we start to look more and more like a large carrier, but we don't restrict drivers in any way. We don't force dispatch anything. Because everyone owns their own trucks. So
what do you do, Tobenna, when someone like me, Cassandra Logistics, right? I'm a logistics company, or Cassandra Shipping. I'm a big shipper. I'm Costco. I think I'm hiring Cloudtrucks with 411 trucks. But I'm not hiring Cloudtrucks. I'm hiring a bunch of owner-operators who are going balls to the wall with no oversight. So what's your response to that? And let me add on. Well, what's your response to that first? Because I know that would piss off a lot of brokers and shippers. They'd be like, I thought I hired Cloudtrucks, which is a trucking company, and you're like, no, that's why we're called Cloud, which by the way is a brilliant name, Cloudtrucks. We're not. We're just a platform. What do you do to reconcile that misconception between those hiring carriers?
So there is lack of forced dispatch. So we don't force dispatch at all. And then there's oversight. We have some oversight because we have to, right? When you give a load to Cloudtrucks, we've taken on the responsibility, and this is part of the fees that we have on the driver side is because we've taken on this responsibility. So let's say you're Costco, a Cloudtrucks driver has booked this load. they're supposed to deliver it, and for some reason something goes wrong, or the person maybe just joined Cloudtrucks and it turns out that they're not the right fit and they dropped your load somewhere in the middle of nowhere. The good thing about working with Cloudtrucks is you get the same thing that you would get with any other carrier, which is we now take on the responsibility. We have hundreds of drivers within our platform. We figure out how to get someone else out there. We incentivize them to pick up that load and complete that delivery. So there's still oversight across multiple areas, and we make it very clear to every driver who joins the platform that, look, you are signing up for specific safety requirements, and you're also signing up for specific performance requirements. And we track these things with we built some data science models. We track the performance across the board. We actually now send performance emails on a driver by driver basis, so everyone understands how they're performing. And if you go below a specific threshold, right, we have to kick you off the platform, because ultimately we need to have some level of oversight to protect the community as a whole. So we see it as community management more than anything else. The drivers still have freedom on what they decide to pick up, but the moment you commit to that, then that oversight kind of kicks in.
So this is, I never knew about Cloudtrucks, not because you guys aren't special, because a lot of people knew about it and they were like, how do you not know about Cloudtrucks, Cassandra? But I'll tell you what happened. We were in beta phase for Carrier Share, and one of my users pinged me and they're like, hey, Cloudtrucks, we use Cloudtrucks all the time. You have them as an F in your software. And my software it runs the FMCSA algorithms and looks at all the FMCSA data directly. And then what it has done is it's calculated if you are a 411 truck carrier compared to other similar truck count carriers, how are you performing compared to them from an FMCSA performance perspective, and data perspective too. So in your category of Cloudtrucks, you guys got an F. You got a score of a 33 out of 100. So they were like, we use Cloudtrucks all the time. Why are they an F? They passed all of our onboarding requirements. And for me, I told them this is a performance score. And I'm sure FreightWaves will show the image for me so that people can see it. But I looked into, you have 2 years and 5 months of authority. So this is how we go through, and brokers and shippers and everyone looks at how a carrier is going to perform for you. I'm looking at it right now. That's why I apologize for this. But so we look at how have you done compared to other carriers, at least at Carrier Share, at other carriers with regards to inspections, the data you provide us, the authority length, whether you're rated, and the number of trucks. So let's see, 411 trucks, 236 trucks have been inspected. You've been inspected in a lot of states. The out-of-service rate for your vehicle is high. Your driver out-of-service rates are high compared to other, very high, like they're double, sometimes triple the things. Your violations, so out of the 236 inspections, you have 350 violations. So across the board, you're at the bottom of the class when it comes to unsafe driving, hours of service, vehicle maintenance, controlled substance and alcohol, driver fitness, you're actually doing okay. So this is how you're viewed when we think, and as we should, because you are a carrier, you have this DOT number and everybody's running under your DOT number as being leased on. What's your game plan to get people, because from a performance perspective, what the tool indicates is that your carriers are going to have maintenance problems, they're going to have problems with drivers, and there's a high chance of delay due to poor driving practices. So what's when you hear that kind of data, and you're like, what's your game plan for getting these violations under control, and kind of turning the ship? Or is it not like, hey, we're a cloud platform, this is how it is, you guys, fuck off? That's
no.
Say that too. It's okay.
No. I wouldn't say that. So the first thing to note is we're doing something that probably has never been done before in terms of going from literally 0 to 400s, and will be 1,000+ carrier within the next few months and then continue to scale. So if you think about some of the largest carriers out there, they top out somewhere around 12, 14,000, maybe some are now up to 18,000, but that was done over decades. The reason I bring that up is when you're scaling this quickly, the systems that exist today, including like the FMCSA systems, have some assumptions on how a carrier is going to scale, what that looks like, how many inspections you're going to get. So there's this slow growth that's assumed, and we're scaling much faster than that. So I think that one of the issues that we've seen is when things start to correct, your scores don't correct quite as quickly, right? Over the past few months, we did notice some of this data. The biggest areas that we noticed were the vehicle out of service compliance was pretty high. So we changed a number of things immediately. One, we stopped accepting vehicles past a certain age. And so we made that change immediately. Two, we built out a system for inspection. So drivers have to submit an inspection every single quarter. This is part of that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I was talking
that's
about.
what I would have done
yeah.
too.
So so we have that now.
Oh, make sure, Tobenna, you probably already know this, but make sure they're not fake.
Yes. Oh, we make it only from specific companies that we've partnered with. Yes, specific vendors that we've partnered with, and then the good thing about us too is that because we think about everything in terms of technology, we've now built our own technology, drivers to be able to upload these inspection reports. It goes to the right team, the safety team. They review those inspection reports. They're able to leave notes. So there's a full system that's baked in there, right? So we've started to see the correction in the data that we track. It'll take some amount of time on the FMCSA side. Same thing with the unsafe driving, same thing with things like use of personal conveyance. I think that's where we've gotten in some trouble on ELD kind of, on the ELD side of things. So every single thing we see as, okay, this is partly a kind of oversight problem, and then it's also a technology problem, and it forces us to build the technology that we need, and then we watch the trends. We always have early trends that are showing us how things are moving, and then it starts to show up in the FMCSA records. And actually, if you look over the past few months, you'll see that things have actually gotten better over time. And then the drug and alcohol use one, I think there's like one or two cases of
I was just about to ask you about that. What's your plan of?
No, the people in those cases have been kicked off the platform. I think there was a case. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the exact details of the
You're
case.
Right. It's not like it was. Yeah. It's not like it was exactly violations. Vehicle maintenance.
Yeah, it was two violations. Yeah. Yeah, so those ones were two violations the moment those things were caught. And I think one of them was actually caught through our randomized drug test program. So the moment it was caught, we kicked the person off the platform, we reported it, all of that stuff. So we're pretty on top of this stuff. And we have a world-class safety team that came from places like Schneider. So this is an area that we definitely consider to be a huge area of responsibility for us.
I am very excited to hear more moving forward, like to get you back on so you can tell us what else you're doing to combat this, to see the numbers, because I actually can see that your numbers are starting to improve. Let's see, May was still a little rough, but not as bad as April, and definitely not as bad as March. Poor March. Oh boy. But you'll start turning this around, and on my platform soon, we're about to roll out. People are able to leave reviews. You'll be able to, I don't know if you opt into to tracking with P44, but you get more points for that. So we're starting to add more into it. So it's not just FMCSA data. Yeah. But I will tell you that people who do use Cloudtrucks, or at least people who know about Cloudtrucks, they think it's bloody brilliant, and it does sound like it's brilliant. That's great. So I think it's so cool. My favorite thing you've said today is the word community. Like that is by far my favorite thing. And I think that the single drivers, the owner operators, they do have a great community, but they need more of a community, especially the one you're describing. So it's very powerful. And so what can we expect coming up? Are you going to be at any conferences? Are you going to be doing anything? What do we need to know? Do you want us to follow you somewhere? Just tell us and we'll be right there with you, because I love technology and I love what you're doing.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think we were just at MATS. We had a pretty big showing at MATS. We are going to be at the Freight Waves conference that's coming up. I think it's a small
in Chattanooga.
Yes. So we're going to be there. I think I might be speaking there actually, and we have a number of conferences kind of planned throughout the year. You can follow us on Facebook. I think it's Cloudtrucks HQ on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. It's @Cloudtrucks on Twitter, and we have a lot of really exciting stuff coming out. We think about everything in terms of those 4 key areas that I mentioned. How do we help drivers generate more revenue? How do we help improve cash flow? How do we help lower costs? And then how do we improve compliance? So we're going to keep rolling out some exciting things across those 4 areas over the next few months. And yeah, like that's really how we think about the business. And we don't think about it as like, are we a carrier? Are we not a carrier? We actually have products where we're not the carrier. We just think about it as full business management suite for trucking entrepreneurs and helping them succeed a lot more than they are today.
It's utterly brilliant. I hope next time I see you that your world-class safety team will convince you to create the 4th tier to change that from how do you be more compliant to how do you be more safe? And it becomes the 1st tier of moving this community to safety first. Yes. But I'm sure your compliance people already say that all the time, and you're like, fuck off, I got to deal with revenue, I got to deal with this product.
No, I never say fuck off.
Like, nobody wants to talk about safety, Cassandra. And I'm going to delete out the part where I talked about dog food, and I'm never coming on MadGaines again.
No. I think safety, when I talk about compliance, I am talking about safety. It's safety and compliance, right? And no, I think it's critical. I mean, at the end of the day, these are big vehicles.
Tobenna, because compliance means almost the bare minimum. Mm-hmm. That's what compliance means, which you're not doing. In fact, you're doing more than that with your community, because you're seeing that it correlates with maintenance and performance and everything else. And so you're doing more than that. That's why I fucking hate compliance, because I'm like, nah, it's safety first. Is you want to be safer on this road, people. You want it. Like, and there are a lot of drivers out there who are like, I do want to be safer, and I want to get rid of these bottom feeders. I don't want bottom feeders to be with Cloudtrucks ruining up our data and making us look like we don't know what we're doing. But anyhow, sorry, cut you off again. But that was my piece about compliance versus safety.
I agree with you. We will call it safety and compliance going forward.
You see, and he's lying to me, but he's a great comedian. I can't wait to have you back. I want to just let me know, like, I know you're never going to come back. But I want you to come back and tell us more of what you're working on, like, and some of the stuff you're seeing with the data and things you're doing with the community, because what you're doing is powerful, I think, and very cool. Thank you for joining us. And y'all, I hope you reach out to Tobenna. He's right on LinkedIn, and you obviously he's on Facebook everywhere else, but it's a great company, and tell him your feedback about what you think he's doing and things you want him to do better and what you want to know about too, because we're all curious about what's going on with Cloudtrucks. Thank you for joining us, and for everybody else, we will see you guys next Friday.
Whatever your shipment, no matter the mode of transport, the real-time location and condition of your shipment matters. With Tithe, you simply activate the tracker with the push of a button and secure it on a shipment at the box, pallet, or container level. That's it. Now, your team can see and create shipments on the Tithe platform, and Tithe's hyper-accurate sensors start streaming data and alerts to your team in real time. Tithe, because every shipment matters.
Shipwell knows supply chains require plenty of prep, just like cooking. Without the right tools and ingredients, things don't turn out as planned. Luckily, Shipwell's advanced TMS solution has your recipe for success this produce season. A premium capacity network, end-to-end visibility, and the power to manage it all with one simple solution. Don't get burned this produce season. Satisfy your appetite for supply chain success with Shipwell. Join the shipping evolution.
Welcome to our Domestic Supply Chain Summit. I'm Craig Fuller here with Lee Klasko. Lee is otherwise known as Logistics Lee. He is the supply chain and logistics analyst at Bloomberg. Lee, how are things going? It's been a chaotic couple of years. What are your thoughts on what's happened around the domestic supply chain industry? How would you describe this?
Yeah, I mean, to say chaotic would be an understatement. The good news, I guess, for shippers is that things will probably be normalizing in 2022. The bad news for shippers is that rates will probably remain historically high, albeit, you're going to see a reduction in whether we're talking about truckload or intermodal spot rates, and even container liner rates that we've seen over the last couple months. There seems to be supply coming back to the market when we're looking at truckers, and then the liners, they've really been able to reduce some of that congestion that we've been seeing on the West Coast. Congestion's down about 40% from its peak in mid-November, so that those are all good signs for the supply chain to getting back to normal. But from a real, truly normal or truly fluid system, I mean, we are probably, months, if not quarters, away from that actually happening.
Now, you mentioned something, sort of dichotomy between capacity staying or volume staying tight, but rates sort of going down. What is driving sort of that sort of separation between the supply and demand matrix and the pricing?
Yeah, well, if you look at the, on the liner side, as congestion is broken up, as we get past the Lunar New Year, the supply chain is going to have time to catch up, and that's going to have a flow-through effect into, the domestic supply chain as well, where, truckers and railroads will have a chance to kind of catch their breath a little bit, and that should put some downward pressure on the spot rates that we're looking at within the truckload industry. Obviously, if some COVID variants pop up and we revert back to a shutdown, the trucking industry has been kind of susceptible to the COVID pandemic for a number of reasons. Obviously, the average age of truckers, not to mention their typical health profile, makes them kind of susceptible to serious repercussions. Even God forbid they get sick. So you saw a lot of capacity come out, and not only that, in the current job market, truckers have a lot of different opportunities, to go elsewhere, make maybe even better money and have a much better work-life balance. Because as you know, Craig, trucking is a difficult profession, on people's lives, given the fact that they're only home a couple times a month, those that are over the road.
Yeah, it certainly is. Lee, one of the things that people have been trying to figure out is where's all this capacity or these drivers going to come from if we do see a level of sort of new capacity come into the market? Is it owner-operators that are creating new fleets? Is it the large enterprise fleets have sort of figured out how to hire and retain? Where do you think the new capacity is coming about?
Well, I'm personally in the camp where I don't think capacity is necessarily going to come into the market at scale. I'm a believer that we do have a driver shortage. I know some people argue whether it's a shortage or just the fact that we just have too much turnover in the industry. I think it's one of the same. If you don't have enough people for the demand there, it's a shortage. So I don't necessarily think that capacity is going to be coming into the market. I think rates are going to be coming down, not so much because of new capacity, it's because the demand and what's kind of out there is kind of more aligned, because the demand right now is so backed up that there's just not nearly enough truckers to take in all that demand that's been backed up, whether we're talking about drayage or dedicated lanes over the road. And trucking companies are having a difficult time finding people. It's becoming more costly to find people to seat tractors. and the larger companies, they're better situated to get new tractors. As a lot of people here today probably know, the OEMs, the manufacturers of heavy duty trucks are having, difficulty, manufacturing their trucks because they're having kind of the same supply chain issues that the automotive industry is having, that the semiconductor industry is having, that really everyone is having, no matter what sector you're involved in. So, we think that it's going to be a very difficult proposition for trucking companies to find drivers. To kind of answer your question, because you did have a question, which I just did circles around, but I think it's probably going to be, on the owner-operated side, just because trucking companies, at least the large trucking fleets that are out there, they're looking for more diversified models, more asset-light models, and they want to leverage on the owner-operator fleet for that incremental growth, as opposed to building their own networks, especially when we're talking about over-the-road, not dedicated, but, their own over-the-road networks. We saw some interesting acquisitions today with Knight-Swift buying a regional LTL carrier, MME. That's really their plan, to be more diversified, less reliant on truckload. And again, an LTL driving position is probably more attractive than a truckload driving position, because those drivers they're usually home every day, especially the pickup and delivery folks, and the line haul folks are home, if not every day. They kind of have a set schedule that they can kind of manage their lives, their personal lives around their profession, which is really tough to do when you're an over-the-road trucker.
So Lee, you've talked a lot about drivers not joining the industry because of the threat of autonomous trucks and their jobs being automated. How do you think the carriers are handling it?
Well, I think the carriers are kind of, they want to be involved, and they want to be part of the evolution of trucking. A lot of them, Werner, for example, has an ownership in Too Simple. The CEO of Knight-Swift is an advisor to Embark. These are both two autonomous trucking companies. So, they want to have a front seat to what's going on, so they can kind of morph their businesses to kind of embrace those new technology changes within the industry.
The whole idea of autonomous is pretty interesting to me, because one of the things that I think is sort of a byproduct of the fragmented nature of the industry, or primary causes, is the driver themselves. If we eliminate drivers, it strikes me that this industry becomes more attractive for private equity. It becomes more of a software play than it is today. What do you think how does the business model shift if and when we get autonomous trucking?
Yeah, so if I went into my time machine, which I built back here, and maybe go out 50 years, because like I said earlier, I don't think it's going to be widespread adoption right away, but as the technology finally becomes more widely adopted, I think it's going to be an extreme consolidation of the market, similar to what we saw with the rail industry, where there's 7 Class 1 rails, soon to be 6. I think you're just going to see maybe a half a dozen to a dozen major players, and the kind of owner operators will be stuck to kind of niche drayage markets, or maybe some other markets that we don't know. Maybe they go to Mars and there's just trucking demand for on Mars. Because again, we're talking way out there, but we definitely see, if that were to happen, the market to consolidate, because you wouldn't need the driver, and the driver really provides that fragmentation to the market, because it's so easy for somebody with a CDL to get into the market and kind of start their own business. And that's why there's been always a lot of entrepreneurs within trucking, and a lot of the major trucking companies that are here today, it's usually started with one person and one truck.
Yeah, but what happens to the brokerage industry if that happens? Because the reason they're largely successful is that they, benefit from the opaqueness and the fragmented nature of the market. It would suggest that if all of a sudden you had autonomous trucks, that you may not need the 16,000 freight brokerages that are in the market.
I mean, I think you would see a rationalization of that industry as well. I think that there is always a place for freight brokers because really good freight brokers do more than just bring buyers and sellers together, right? They a lot of the times they're holding the hand of the shipper or the trucker. Obviously, you wouldn't be holding the hand of the computer, but you're still the shipper. Hopefully we're still going to be people, and I think they'll provide a role for that going forward in this, I guess, utopia kind of place where the machines have taken over.
Yeah, I think the railroad analogy is a really strong one because I think a lot of people who are sort of more recent to the industry may not realize how fragmented the railroad industry at one point was and how many railroads there were, 40, 50, 80 years ago. But that's largely changed. You want to tell us a little bit about sort of the history of the railroads and how that consolidated?
Sure. So, the industry was deregulated in the 1980s with something called the Staggers Act, and at that time, it was very hard for railroads to merge. It was also even hard for a railroad, even an unprofitable railroad, to go bankrupt because the government interest wanted that railroad to continue to perform even if it wasn't able to make any money. With the passing of the Staggers Act, you've had something like, I think the number is like 37 or 38 railroads, Class 1 railroads, so the biggest railroads consolidate down to 7. In terms of ownership of railroads, one of those railroads, Burlington Northern, is now independently owned by Berkshire Hathaway, so that's not a public railroad. And then you just had the recent, at least it hasn't been finalized yet, but the merger between Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern, the two smallest Class 1s, they're getting together in a merger which probably will close in the second half of next year. And so that will bring you down to 6 railroads. We don't see further consolidation anytime soon. Right now, the way it's set up, if there is further consolidation, it would probably be an east-west railroad, a CSX and a Norfolk Southern either getting together with Union Pacific or Burlington Northern. I think that is something that could be viable. It's interesting. The long-term CEO at Norfolk Southern, who has been really against kind of his company merging with anybody when Canadian Pacific kind of approached them a couple of years ago. He recently retired, so who knows? Some of the Eastern rails might be more willing to merge with somebody going forward. But I think that's that is probably, it's going to happen, but I think we're like multiple years out before that happens, because I think the STB wants to see how this CP KSU merger plays out and what the implications are for shippers. At the end of the day, what really will promote a deal is A, there's no overlap, which in East and West railroads don't really have that much overlap, and B, does it enhance this shipper's service and increase competition versus taking competition away. And I think that the litmus test for the CP KSU deal will tell us a lot about what that could be for an East-West railroad merger.
Lee, I've heard a lot of people around the railroad industry talk about autonomous trucks are more threatening to the railroads than perhaps they are even to the trucking players, the companies that are in it, particularly the enterprise carriers. Do you buy that argument? Is there a risk with autonomous trucking taking away railroad volumes at a point where it makes that model economically infeasible?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a risk. If you look at the Venn diagram of what makes sense to go on rail versus trucking, there is a portion of those two circles, if you will, that they go back and forth, or it might be viable for rail or by truck. I think if you have autonomous trucking, yes, it could take away some volumes, but let's just say, like, well, why don't rails go autonomous? I mean, at the end of the day, they're on a track, which is probably a little safer than being on a highway, and the issue there really becomes a labor issue. So it has to be a decision with labor because the rail industry is heavily unionized, and obviously they're not going to be huge fans of their members, their union members losing their jobs or reducing their ranks. So it has to be something in it for them, and whether that's reducing the number of people in the locomotive from 2 to 1 or from 1 to 0, it's definitely possible. And if the railroad industry has enough loss from an autonomous trucking world, you would see probably labor being more interested to talk about providing or creating autonomous locomotives. And again, it's probably not something that would be widespread across the North American network, but there are probably certain lanes, certain areas where it just makes sense. And then we also always have to think about what if something goes wrong. So whether it's on a rail network or a truck, how does that get fixed if the truck breaks down or the weather's no good, or there's something wrong with the air brakes on the railroad, because there are people that have to walk the train and make sure everything is okay, and there's those issues as well. I think that transportation in general is just going to become more autonomous, but just not fully autonomous. And whether that's you're talking about brokers earlier, brokers can do a heck of a lot more today than they could 20 years ago because of technology. Brokers are becoming a lot more efficient because there's some transactions that are truly frictionless now, where there's no human interaction, and so the broker can just handle those issues that arise. And again, we're talking about early, hold the hand of that shipper or that trucker if there's something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an interesting time. This infrastructure bill seems like it really benefits the railroads in some ways even more than trucking. What is your perception of the new this new age of transportation and what the infrastructure bill might mean for the industry?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. A lot of companies are looking towards, ESG, environmental and governance metrics. A lot of public companies are looking at the ESG metrics, and some of the things that are going on make railroads a lot more environmentally friendly relative to trucking, just given where they are from a fuel consumption standpoint. But I would take a step back and the infrastructure bill in general is just stimulus, right? And stimulus is good for everybody. Well, it's usually good for everybody, but it's
labor. I mean, it's been good, but for shippers and carriers finding drivers, it hasn't been good. So there's the byproduct of that, but.
Yeah, so we kind of, let's bring this back to the beginning of the conversation. We believe that the rate cycle is going to be a lot longer than people think this time. We're not saying this time is different. We're just saying this time is longer. There's going to be, like, we've peaked, all right? We all know we've peaked, but it's going to remain relatively high from historical standpoints. Trucking companies will still have pricing power because there's going to be constrained supply, whether it's they can't get drivers, the drug clearinghouse is keeping people out of the market, COVID's impact on people not wanting to work, people's opportunities in other industries. So you're going to have that tight market, and then you sprinkle a little increase in demand, whether that's for flatbed, because of a lot of the infrastructure stuff will be flatbed or bulk, but it's still taking CDL drivers that you're going to need to deliver that stuff. Is this going to be good for the trucking industry? It's going to be good for the rail industry because you're creating additional demand out there. Will it increase the inflationary pressures that everyone is facing today? Absolutely. That's going to be, for labor. It could be even for fuel and equipment. Those inflationary pressures are really some of the main reasons why everyone has the pricing power that they have. They have to recover their costs or they're not going to be in business. We can argue about what is a proper return on your investment, but if you're a public company, you're trying to maximize that as best as you can, and juggling everything else at the same time. So we think that the stimulus bill is going to be a win-win for trucking and for rail. I don't necessarily see one necessarily benefiting that much more than the other. I think it's going to be good for everybody.
Lee, bold prediction. I know this is domestic, but what happens in the ocean certainly doesn't stay on the ocean market. Do you think the container lines end up getting caught in regulatory pressure if they have this sort of super long rate cycle and pricing power? Do you think they become subject to governments trying to really rein them in?
I think from a headline standpoint, yes. From an actionable standpoint, no. Because I mean, you remember, right? What was it like 20 months ago? They were losing money. They were hemorrhaging money.
It's the worst. It's like the worst industry.
Yeah.
Return on capital you could possibly.
I cover all modes of transportation, and I talk to all sorts of people domestically and internationally. And when I talk about the marine shipping industry, it's like the container liner industry and the dry bulk industry is not really investable. It's really a trading mechanism because you're trading the cycle. And 3 years ago, those industries were terrible, and now they have pricing power. They're making money. The tanker industry actually is going to probably have a brighter 2022 for increased supply of oil, increased demand of oil. A lot of old ships that are probably going to get scrapped. So going back to the liner question, I don't see regulation actually happening because we do think that rates are going to stair step lower. They'll probably start stair stepping lower after the Lunar New Year. Things are going to get back to normal. I think the good news for the liner industry is that it's gotten a little more consolidated. They're a little more disciplined. A lot of, especially the European companies are, I would say, a lot more disciplined than some of their Asian counterparts. And that has a lot to do with, if you're a Chinese liner, you're probably part of you is owned by the government, and that government also probably owns shipyards, and those shipyards want to be employed. So you might order more ships than you actually need. I think we'll see like an increase on supply on the water in 2023. And so 2023 is not going to be as good a year as 2022, which is not going to be as good a year as 2021. So just remember, everyone, this is a cycle, and things will probably get back to normal. And maybe in 2024 we'll have a laugh about like how container rates from China to LA are under $1,000.
Yeah,
anything's possible.
The market resets. Trucking sounds like, Lee, you subscribe to the thought that the market's largely peaked, and from here on out, or from here for the short term at least, it is slightly downward pressure on rates across all modes. Is that a summary of what we're talking about?
Yeah, so on the truck, so I'll be a little more specific. On the truckload side, we still expect contractual rates to increase mid-high single digits next year, on top of the low double digits that we're seeing this year. So we still think that the truckload market will see rates increases. We think the LTL industry will have mid-single rate increases. Now, when we're talking about the liner industry, you're going to see declines just because it's and the declines that we're talking about, the spot market is up 200%, you want to call it. You can just throw out a crazy number and you'd be like, yeah, that's what it's up, because there's so many different measurements of it. But that's just unsustainable. So you're going to see those rates come down, and so year over year you're going to see declines. Also on the air freight market, you'll probably see rates coming down as more supply comes back to the market. Again, that's excluding any severe shocks from travel restrictions related to any COVID variants. I'm supposed to go to Mexico at the end of the month, so I'm hoping that vacation plans are intact. And then so we talked about trucking, and on the rail side, listen, rails, they have pricing power. They have pricing power no matter what the cycle is. They're going to get rates above their costs, and so that could be low to mid single digits in terms of next year increases. So and then when we talk about the spot markets, the spot market will definitely be down. Well, definitely, hopefully, probably will be down in 2022 when it comes to truckload and the container industry.
It's a crazy time, Lee, and I can't wait to see if some of these predictions come true. Really enjoyed your time today, and appreciate you being a part of this. We'll certainly come back and talk about all of these topics, and we're going to cover them throughout the day. So really appreciate your time. And thank you for tuning in to our FreightWaves Summit as we close out the year and we look forward to next.
Coming up this morning on FreightWaves Now, the Supreme Court has decided against hearing the California trucking case of AB5. We're going to break down what that means from multiple different perspectives with our editor, John Kingston, as well as from the legal side of things and what that looks like on the direct impact for California ports. We'll cover that and more stories today on FreightWaves Now. Good Friday morning, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of FreightWaves Now. Rounding out your week, I'm Keely Nix here with Anthony Smith.
That's right, and it's on this Friday episode where we have a jam-packed episode, of course, with the Supreme Court decision and AB5. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment here, and this is really going to be one of the topics of conversation throughout this morning. We also have Peter Rensler, who's going to be joining us from Metaphor a little bit later on today, but first, for our top story, we're going to go with John Kingston, who's going to be joining us here now in the studio, talking about the latest news around AB5 and the Supreme Court's decision. John Kingston, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
I'm joining you in the studio. I think I'm in New York. You're in Chattanooga.
We would love it if you were here, John.
The studio means to me, okay?
But nonetheless, we are still happy to have you, and we're kind of bringing back the wrap-up to the saga, the AB5 case. It's been on your headlines, at least, since 2020. Supreme Court yesterday dropping the decision that they are not going to hear the case. It is going to go into effect in California. Let's start out just kind of going through the history of this. This has been kind of in the works since 2020.
Well, okay, so AB5 went into effect on January 1st, 2020, and on New Year's Eve, literally New Year's Eve, the California Trucking Association got an injunction in a lower federal court that AB5, as it applied to trucking, was in conflict with a law called the Federal Aviation Administration Authorization Act, the F4A. And the state took that to appeal. In April 2021, the appellate court of the Ninth Circuit handed down a decision that, in fact, it was not, and that AB5, as it applied to trucking, was legal. However, at the same time, an injunction or a stay was handed down, and that stay has been in place now for 14 months. The CTA, the California Trucking Association, took it to the Supreme Court several months ago. I think it was November. The court said they would look at it. They didn't say that they would grant a certiorari, but they sort of accepted it as a kind of like a pre-look. And I think that the legal industry that follows trucking, that has trucking as its clients, were pretty excited by that because they took another case involving C.H. Robinson. It too was denied for certiorari. Then on Monday, this past Monday, the certiorari list came out. The C.H. Robinson case was denied on it. Everybody was kind of shocked that the case involving the CTA was not on it. And then yesterday, to everybody's surprise, thank you, Kaylee, for letting me know that it was out there. The Supreme Court, in fact, said it without comment that it would not review the case. And now what happens is it's really kind of just a technicality. The case goes back to the Ninth Circuit, where they will lift the injunction, and AB5 will be implemented in California trucking.
And so, John, with this decision, AB5 is kind of the complicated ruling, right? There is this test called the ABC test, which helps classify which folks are independent contractors and which folks aren't. So can you walk us through that ABC test and kind of where and how it relates to trucking? Because the language itself is kind of vague, right?
Yeah, well, so the ABC test came out of a case called Dynamex, which came out in 2018, and it was a civil law. And what the California Assembly did under the leadership of a woman named Lorena Gonzalez, who's no longer in the Assembly, is that they basically codified it. So I see you putting up there the ABC test. Let's skip 1 and 3, or A and C, and go right to number 2, also known as B, because that's what's important. The worker is performing work tasks that are outside of the usual course of the company's business activity. So if a trucking company hires a janitorial firm to clean the offices at night, they are under no mandate to make those people employees, because the operations of the firm are not janitorial. If they hire an outside independent truck driver to do what is their normal business, which is trucking, then they may be an employee. So that is the problem. The B prong has always been the problem for the California trucking industry. And all of the discussion really about how it might affect the California trucking has really focused in on that B prong. So what's happening now, based on everything I talked to people about yesterday, is that companies it's not as if they hadn't looked at this possibility that this might happen. They have been. So the question then is, what kind of model do you implement to stay in compliance with AB5? And there's probably going to be, for 17 companies, there's probably going to be 18 different solutions. No one solution, in the beginning at least, is going to be identical. What is that solution going to be? As I said, there's going to be a lot of different solutions. There's one that's pretty radical that would involve trucking companies essentially firing all their employee drivers, turning themselves completely into a brokerage company. And of course, a lot of these companies do have brokerage units. And that they would then just simply broker out freight to independent owner-operators. Since the companies are no longer involved in moving freight themselves, they would not be in conflict with the B prong. That is one change. That's obviously a radical change. There's another solution or another approach, which is if California is really not a big part of your business, you'll just stay out of the state of California. That obviously has significant impact on capacity. Let's note here that the main target of the backers of AB5, it was probably not dry van freight going from Redding, California to Orange County, California. It is the port drivers. It is the drayage drivers. And if there are going to be enforcement actions undertaken by the state of California, they're almost certainly going to focus in on drayage. So right now, I would say that the trucking company owners who are most at risk, most need to be talked off the ledge, are probably those that own drayage companies. That's going to be, I think, where ground zero is going to be in terms of battling this.
And John, we're going to jump into that drayage aspect in just a moment here. But first, can you talk to me about the coverage of this ruling? So if I live, say, in Nevada, is this ruling going to affect me going in and out of California, or do I have to be based in California itself?
That's open for debate. Early on, somebody said, obviously, that's such a massive loophole that you can't just cross into a state and could be exempt from their laws. Okay. I mean, if you're doing most of your business in California, it doesn't matter that you're in Nevada. You certainly can be prosecuted under their laws. Then I spoke to somebody else yesterday who thought that, well, if you only did a small portion of your business in California, then maybe you wouldn't be affected by it. But, let's remember the enforcement divisions of this are a couple of California agencies. That I was told there's going to be two of them. One that deals in wages, and the other deals with labor law enforcement. They're not really well-known segments. Who are they going to go after first? But that's almost not relevant, because companies, they don't want to wait to find out if they're going to be the first target. So they're going to have to go into effect. So yes, a truckload carrier based in Nevada, right across the border, whether it's in Reno or Tahoe or what is that, Lachlan, that's right across the border down in the southern part of Nevada. They're going to have to figure out what to do as well.
So, John, obviously AB5 is the top story of the morning, but we've also got some news from the markets today. We're seeing commodities markets drop pretty rapidly in general, but oil still on the rise, and now diesel jumping up for today as well. What can you tell us about what's going on the oil side of things?
Well, today, yes, the price of diesel on the CME Commodity Exchange is up about 16 cents per gallon. But let's keep things in perspective. It hit its recent high at about $4.57 about 9 days ago, and it has shed more than 65 cents since that time. It's up a significant amount this morning. My guess it's because there's a refinery in France that was announced was going to be closed overnight because of a strike. Usually you don't close down refineries when there's a strike. You can keep them operating for at least a little while. My guess is that's one of the reasons why diesel and gasoline are down. The bigger story is how much diesel has dropped. in the last 9 trading days. Really, a really incredible amount. Of course, it's coming off a very high level. You know, the numbers that came out this week from the Energy Information Agency Administration were very bearish. It showed inventories measured in days cover rising over 30 days for the first time since the early part of the year. And the early part of the year is when you get a lot of heating oil stocks, so you'd expect that because diesel and heating oil are in the same category. It showed demand to be down for diesel and other distillates to be down pretty considerably. Now, these weekly numbers aren't the greatest. Sometimes you get like a 1-week blip and it shoots back up or shoots back down. So let's wait to see what these numbers are. But there were a lot of refineries in the U.S. are running at 95% of capacity. Quite frankly, you really can't do more than 95%. It's almost physically impossible. So all of these things pointed to a kind of bearish products market, and that really helped fuel these last couple of days of decline in diesel. But it was just coming off a market that may have been a little bit overdone, but that's also very concerned about demand.
And John, as you mentioned, 1 week can just kind of be a blip, then it shoots back up. How long do you usually kind of wait to see, okay, this is a trend and a shift in the overall direction? Would it be something like 3 weeks, a month, or something like that in the same kind of trend and direction?
No, remember, they're taking in data all the time. So yes, it's possible that what would happen is that the EIA number for demand goes up next week, and everybody says, "Oh, it was overdone last week," and they go out and do some buying. So it's a constant decision-making process. Nobody waits to make a decision. Years ago when I first started covering oil, when OPEC would meet, I would be talking to traders like 2 weeks before an OPEC meeting. Wow, nobody's doing anything. OPEC's meeting. Now, it's just constant. They're constantly taking in information. They're constantly making decisions, and this is why the volatility is so crazy. Up 16 cents one day and down 13 cents the next. So it's a constant loop of information and trade reaction. And part of it, some of these trading decisions are driven by algorithms. They get a certain piece of information. So no, nobody's waiting 3 or 4 weeks. It's just from our perspective and trying to figure out what demand is doing, which of course is obviously relevant to the trucking market in whole. Yeah, you might need to see a few weeks to see if last week's drop was just a blip, or whether it showed a more significant trend.
John, when it comes to watching commodities markets, I think a lot of folks use commodities as kind of a good indication of, are we getting close to those recessionary times, specifically looking at metals like copper, et cetera. Is diesel and oil, are they kind of recession proof when we're looking at how they change as we're going into recession, or is that something that we should watch too as well for price drops?
Well, I don't think anything's recession-proof. You mentioned copper. Copper has long been known as Dr. Copper because it's a pretty good diagnosis of the ills or the strengths of an economy. I think gasoline, the indications are on gasoline demand being down, reacting more to higher prices already. Diesel, I think, is one of the last to go. As you know, look, when the pandemic hit and the economy fell over, people still needed deliveries of vital supplies, and diesel demand actually did pretty well in spring of 2020 when everything else was cratering. So I think diesel is maybe one of the I'm going to guess diesel is one of the last to go. So if the number from last Wednesday showing a significant downturn in demand holds, I think that's significant.
Of course, the AB5 and what's going on in the oil markets as well. We'll be sure to check in with you. You kind of enjoy your vacation, so we'll check with you a little bit later on. But thanks so much for joining us this morning.
There's a lot going on, Anthony and Kaylee, and I just don't know how much of a vacation this is going to be.
Take your time. We know we get employment numbers next week for June, but I think Anthony's got a good enough grip on the economy. I think that we can get him to do employment numbers.
Let me tell you something, Kaylee. I am going to write that story next Friday, so I can check in from the vacation home we're renting in Northeast Pennsylvania and talk to you next Friday. I will be doing it, so no problem. My golf balls won't be in the background, okay?
There you go. At least enjoy your long weekend, John. We'll talk to you soon, I'm sure. Right now, we're going to head over to Sydney Edwards. She's got our first check of headlines this morning.
Anthony and Kaylee, thank you so much. I'm Sydney Edwards with the first check of our headlines this Friday. The U.S. West Coast dock worker contract expires today, and lawmakers and shippers are getting nervous, wondering what the fallout of a non-agreement could be. The Pacific Maritime Association and the International Longshore and Warehouse Union received a letter of encouragement from 21 congressional members to stay committed to collective bargaining as to not cause massive disruption at the ports. There are over 22,000 dock workers represented by the current agreement, and both parties have committed to keep cargo flowing even as negotiations move beyond the expiration date. Main grievances are around port automation, compensation, and job security. And the National Highway